Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of CISO Insight. My name is Anthony Garcia, and I am part of Sennovate. And today's topic is going to be cybersecurity metrics and KPIs for CISO. And joining us today is Arun, our very own Chief Technology Officer here at Sennovate. So, Arun, why don't you give us a brief introduction of yourself and to the audience, and we can get started.
Hi guys, good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you are, right? My name is Arun Kumar. I've been in the past decade in cybersecurity. I've been part of Sennovate as Chief Technology Officer, leading the cybersecurity solutioning implementation, the overall cybersecurity portfolio of the company. Over at Sennovate, we market ourselves as a one-stop solution for all. So any of your cybersecurity needs, we have a solution for it with a partner ecosystem that we have built on, right? Any of your cybersecurity needs can be addressed over there. That's what I'm leading at Sennovate.
Wonderful. Thank you for that quick introduction. And the thing about me is I like to get just right in and start deep diving for our audience to kind of get a better understanding of what do we mean by KPIs and CISOs. So my first question to you, Arun, is when it comes to Zenvate, right? How do you yourself prioritize which metrics and KPIs to track, but also considering the size, considering the industry, but also the threat landscape?
See, when it comes to KPIs, or some people call it as OKRs, objective key results or key performance indicators, right? It's usually a measure of which direction the company is heading, right? When it comes to cybersecurity KPIs, it's the same applicable to cybersecurity, whether it's going uphill or downhill. It's a kind of a dashboard metric while you're driving in a car, whether you're speeding or slowing down, right? It gives you a metric on where you have to reach. And when it comes to specific organization, there is no golden rule saying these metrics work. As I've said earlier, right? In any of these companies, if you want to measure health of a company, you have profit and loss statements, assets and liabilities, employee churn rate. You can quantify a company if it is doing good or bad. Whereas in cybersecurity, it's a challenge. There's no golden rule that says yeah, cybersecurity is doing good at my organization. But if you take the same metrics to other company, it might not even be in the same space, right? It might be healthcare. Healthcare metrics won't match to your manufacturing, right? Manufacturing won't match with technology companies. And the same applicable to financial institution. They all have their own cybersecurity metrics. When it comes to Sennovate, being a managed security service provider, right? Our main bread and butter in terms of the revenue that we cost, right? It will be MTTD and MTTR, mean time to detect and mean time to response. Those are our SLA commitments to our customers, and that drives the business. And those are some of the metrics along with the compliance. When it comes to recent breaches like Snowflake, right? Third-party risks has become a huge pain for most of the customers. What they look for is a trust that their partner is doing their cybersecurity well. And in order to establish those trust, the compliance plays a vital role. Although many of the cybersecurity professionals, right, they know compliance is a checkmark exercise. But what it also gives you is a credibility. Let's say if Sennovate is a SOC 2 and ISO compliant, right? It gives a reduced risk to our partners and our customers to deal with us in terms of data security, data privacy, that we handle our data well, whether with respect to customers or partners. So compliance also is part of our metrics along with detection and response metrics. And the other key element, which is industry agnostic, is risk management, right? The whole cybersecurity, if you take a business as a whole, right, it dwells with how do you handle risks? How do you mitigate those risks? How can you introduce technology, people, or process to reduce those risks, right? And that's the same in cybersecurity. You have cybersecurity risk. How are you doing? Whether your risk posture is elevating or it is coming down with your investments that you have made. Have you transferred any of your risk to your partners, or have you taken a cybersecurity insurance, which will eliminate the risk to from your organization to insurance providers? So these are some of the metrics that will play a vital role in Sennovate's business, and that's what we focus on.
No, that's great. I mean, when you're talking about reducing the threat landscape, right? Having that MTTR and that MTTI metrics is very important, right? I'm glad to hear that Sennovate is able to do something about that. In that same mentality, right? When we're talking about complex security infrastructures, complex security metrics, right? How do you yourself, right, translate these metrics and KPIs into a format that is not only understandable, but also actionable to, let's say, a board of directors?
Yeah, I would like to use one of the quote that I learned in my experiences, right? When you have something that you want to achieve in your brain, it's a dream, right? When you put it on a paper, it becomes a plan. So dream and plan, right? The complex metrics that are hard for executive to capture when it is coming to cybersecurity, right? If to draw it down with a pen piece of paper, what myself I follow is, draw.io, which is an open source. You don't have to spend anything. It's a free diagramming tool. If you highlight it with the right color, red as the highest risk, yellow as the medium risk, and green as the low risk, right? People respond to visuals and capture the visual aid quicker rather than speaking on a 1 hour Zoom call or 2 hour Zoom calls, right? The visualization aids a lot in conveying your position, your thought process, and what are the most important aspects that the company has to focus, especially when you're dealing with board of executives, right? And the visual aspect is one thing, and back it up with numbers, because numbers is what is used for quantification, right? If you say this is a high risk, right, putting a probability on it, right, it sharpens the ear, saying, yeah, this is high risk. If you say there is a 90% probability of this risk happening, for example, a ransomware incident, right? It's been on the rise for, let's say, all the Move It customers, right? Let's say one of our customer is using Move It, and they are, evaluating their posture, how it looks. For their board, if you go up with in the past 12 months, Move It is on the rise, and we have the same product. There is a supply chain issue here, and you go with the elevated red saying there is a high, more than 50% chance we'll be one of their next victim. That, gets you your points across the board, and they understand what happens if there is a breach. Is our business down? How long will it be down? Is there a revenue loss? Is there a customer service disruption that we have to consider for? What is our crisis management plan, right? If you put a realistic scenario with a number, with a visual aid, that is how you communicate a complex metrics into board of executives where you get their attention. Once you have their attention, it's up to you how you can leverage into action, right? That's where a CISO comes in. This is one of the pivotal role of any CISO, right? Because he has all the tools, technology teams supporting him. It's his duty in order to get them the support from the executives by communicating the same priority in terms of whatever it's on technology field to the executive field. Because in technology, if you have internet exposed SSH service with outdated patches, it takes minutes to get compromised. How do you communicate this to executives, right? That's where the CISO plays a pivotal role, because frankly, executives doesn't even understand, let's say, what happens if it port 22 is open. It's one of many ports. Why can't we shut it down? Why can't we upgrade the package? This is, but when you go with, this is the risk of upgrading, this is the risk of leaving it as it is, this is the cost for adding a mitigation control, how we can work around, right? These kind of options, if you put them on the table with the probability of the risk and the data that they can, realize what is the materialistic impact, that's when, your points of complex topics gets converted into action with the help of your executives.
No, and that's a great point. Some of the responsibilities, not a lot of the responsibilities, do fall on the CISOs, right? And on the side of the communication, right, and creating an actionable, understanding of these metrics, right, to the board. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see today that CISOs have when communicating security posture to that same board?
See, when it comes to measuring security posture, if you look at nowadays the cybersecurity landscape itself, There is cloud security posture management. There is infra security posture management. There is Kubernetes security posture management. It's always technology is evolving. It's very hard to keep it up and have a one consolidated cybersecurity posture management. But one of the biggest challenges has been the evolution of tech, right? Cloud picked up pace like within a decade, right? If you see the market share of cloud, probably a decade ago, it might have been less than a billion or so. Now it's multi-billion dollars when you look at, you know, Microsoft, GCP, Azure, and some of other minor players, right? There is a exponential growth that happened in the past decade on cloud in terms of it's good for speed and agility for business, but bad for cybersecurity because things are always changing and it's very uh, hard for a cybersecurity professional. If the goalpost is always moved across the field, it's difficult to score, right? Because you cannot protect something always moving. What we try to do as cybersecurity professional is establish guardrails. This is how much you can move. This is how fast you can move, right? That's where it becomes tricky, and CISO play a key role in supporting the growth of the organization, the speed which they want to grow with, and also protecting, the intellectual properties, the brand reputations of a breach, right? And customer data and privacy within the organization. And that is some of the challenges, right? One of the key challenges with the latest regulation developments that happened in the United States, right? If you look at SolarWinds, CISO was summoned by regulatory bodies and law enforcement to sit through a hearing saying was it his mistake, right? Is he going to take fall for whatever the SolarWind lapses, right? The same happened with Uber CISO, right? The regulations are not set in stone at the moment, and it creates an ambiguity within a CISO when you're making a decision, right? It's always in the back of the mind, especially in the US, right? When you make some decision, will it be scrutinized? Right? Will law enforcement come after me if something goes wrong? Will the company sue me? Right? These are the questions that haunt CISOs because, frankly, if a company goes bankrupt, is CEO blamed? Right? But if a security lapse, how can CISO be blamed? This is a debate that's going on within the cybersecurity community, right? How can you put a blame on one executive for a lapse in a function, right? Of course, should it be CISO, CO? It's another debate that we can have, but that's kind of where cybersecurity community is split, right? The regulations are one of the utmost challenges because there are data privacy, but there is no uniformity. GDPR follows one, CCPA follows one. Then there is a whole lot of local regulation, health regulation, right? PCI DSS compliances. So that's where it becomes ever challenging for a CISO in order to measure security posture because you might look very well in PCI DSS, but CCPA might fail because that's a privacy, right? And if you look at GDPR regulations, right, you might fill in GDPR, but you might lapse in other compliance areas. There is a lot of overlap when it comes to PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, SOC 2, ISO, you name the frameworks, right? There is a lot, probably 50-60% of them as overlaps with other framework, but there is no one standard that says your organization has a good posture, right? And that creates, based on whatever CISO's experience looks good, that is what is the best posture, and it is tailored to business, right? When it's manufacturing is looking at their production systems are the critical one, right? And their inventory systems are critical one. The posture is determined towards that. For example, if you bring a manufacturing CISO into healthcare, the posture looks different, right? Those are some of the challenges cybersecurity individuals face, especially when it comes to industry specific. Having that security posture, one standard, that is something unheard of in cybersecurity because, as I mentioned, like it's enormous when it comes to compliance framework regulations, right? And threats, forget the threats because that's another pain point because last year it was ransomware, this year it was FTP, move it servers, and recently it's SolarWinds contractor account that compromised third-party risk assessment. And when SolarWinds happened, it was supply chain issues. In the 4 years, it's been four different posture you have to look at for protecting an organization, right? And there is not even one framework that covers all of it, right? Saying, look at it. They all say, yeah, look at vulnerability, look at your asset inventory, look at your attack surface management. But these are all as continuously evolving, and that's what makes CISO's role very challenging. They have to adapt almost on every quarterly basis, because every quarter there is a new threat, new industry is being targeted, changing geopolitical tensions will put a focus on your industries, right? You have to always be prepared, and that's where you see a lot of overlap coming into regulations, overlap into regulations, metrics to managing that posture of cybersecurity within an organization.
No, I think you bring up a lot of great points, right? When it comes to this ever changing security landscape, right? Threat landscape and communication between the C levels and the board members, it's very important, I think, and you can throw some insight on here, right? On trends, right? So as a CISO, right? What emerging trends, right? And again, it could be it's a very broad question, right? What emerging trends in cybersecurity metrics, but also KPIs, should the CISO be aware of, right? Especially in today's ever-changing environment.
See, you look at latest emerging threats, right? Without mentioning AI, I don't think we can close the topic, right? Because that's the emerging trend across industries, right? AI clubbed with ML. ML has been in the field, but it didn't add much impact within the cybersecurity. Yeah, it did anomaly detection, but nobody were actively using it on the practical fields. But I've seen a couple of vendors leveraged ML, machine learning, right, to a fair extent in detecting user behavior analysis. And in terms of upcoming, AI holds a lot of potential. Always cybersecurity professional as we, right? We're always skeptical, right? Whether it's going to take down the world, become another Skynet, right? Of real world and burn the world to the ground, right? That's one angle of cybersecurity, in looking at risk averse situation. Another angle is being a business professional, look for potential opportunities, that how a business can benefit, how your team can benefit using cybersecurity embedded within artificial intelligence, right? So that's some of the areas that are promising. Most of the vendors are already bolted on AI, even as a chatbots, right? That's the trendy feature now, having LLM tag along with the product, assist them in utilizing their product. One of the areas I also see promising is SIM solution, adding it for correlation, enriching data, providing analyst. One of the biggest challenge in the industry for a quite long time has been skill gap, right? There are millions of vacant positions of cybersecurity which are unfilled. If you look at probably last, even before COVID, right? For the past 5, 6 years, it's always in the headlines, skill gap, right? Probably that's some promising area to look forward how AI can address those areas, right? There is a potential there, but nothing conclusive yet being demonstrated. Many vendors are trying, so that looks promising, right? And real-time analytics, because most of the products claim real-time analytics, they're always lagging a bit, right? In terms of whether it's a minutes or days or even months sometimes. If you're looking for a vulnerability that 0 day is being exploited, you rely on a monthly or weekly scan to determine, right? Whether it's exposed, you are impacted, what is your impact. So real-time analytics looks promising. So a couple of cloud security posture manager do this in minutes, which is a good, close to real time, and predictive modeling, right? For example, let's consider the ongoing crisis in terms of Ukraine, Russia, or Gaza, and Israel, right? Situation. I've seen vendors struggle to spin up a posture like, due to the increased geopolitical tension, what is my risk of compromise, right? I'm an US company. There are two ongoing wars where US has taken sides, right? And what is me being as a US business, what is my risk? To build a couple of companies took 3 months, which is almost a quarter, right? If you look at 0 days being exploited, it is within hours or days, right? If a state-sponsored actor wants to get into your environment and you are evaluating a posture which takes 3 months to determine how are you, well positioned with them in defending them, right? That is a big gap. Right? That's where predictive analytics comes into picture, right? Saying how changing in geopolitical tension and ongoing conflicts, emerging threats can impact you in real time. For example, the latest political uh, elections that are ongoing. Is your organization exposed to some of those risks? If exposed, what is the probability? Right? These kind of predictive analytics are yet to see in cybersecurity. Right? And most of the products that they do, these are mostly consulting engagement, which as Sennovate, we can also help. And that's some of the areas where I think AI can add predominant value in correlating ongoing events and, only giving you what is impacting you, because most of the time that's where consulting experiences are spent, saying based on experience, based on the ongoing development, based on the customer profile. These are the impacts. To build those, depending on the size of the customer, it takes time. And that's where AI can, speed up a lot of things, right? And some of the emerging threats to look at is business continuity metrics as part of cybersecurity. Most of the organization already have it, but some of the organizations still look at it as separate. But I think that's going away because of the DR business continuity and crisis management embedded as part of cybersecurity availability strategies, right? So those are some areas to look forward in terms of tools, technology, or people come up with, right? And overall, cybersecurity as an enterprise risk management, right? Those are something to look forward for, as cybersecurity is always evolving. Uh, getting into that enterprise risk management, we already follow within cybersecurity, but to get into as an enterprise risk as a cybersecurity metrics, right? That will play a crucial role. I think that is something to look forward sometime in the future to have. For example, if you look at US, SEC has always been ahead in terms of having this, but their approach has been questioned by many of the cybersecurity professionals, like disclosing a breach within 24 hours or 48 hours, right? Which is most of the time can be a false positive, or it might be less time to have a conclusive information or what was the impact, right? That's where the debate on cybersecurity professionals are divided. One is having transparency. Second is being accurate, because most of the time when we are dealing with incidents, it's always developing. Like how an investigator would say, will not comment on ongoing investigation. But that's not the case in cybersecurity, right? When you look at law enforcement, they can clearly deny, will not comment on ongoing investigation, whereas cybersecurity professional has to disclose this to SEC, right, of an ongoing investigation. So that's the disparity in between what cybersecurity professionals see, like why that is not practical. Those are some areas which will be improved, right? Definitely transparency is good, but it has to come up with a trade-off of what's best for the business and what's best for the industry as cybersecurity, because most of the time that we see the incidents take a couple of days to understand the full scope and mitigate and come up with an action plan. Some of the time, customers try to figure out what's going on for the initial days, because the damage is so huge, they are trying to piece it together, right? Revealing that might be premature within 24 to 48 hours, right? But that's where, things to look forward in terms of metrics, how those can be reported, those can be tracked, and how it might impact businesses.
No, and that's good. And understanding the responsibilities of a CISO again, right? Vast, right? Careful planning, having that cybersecurity strategy, right, for the entire organization, but also being aware of these emerging trends, but also having that cybersecurity resilience planning as well, right? What do you do after? How do you implement? How do you proactive? How do you react, right? I think about resources, right? Resources within an organization are sometimes finite, right? So how can a CISO, having information of these emerging trends, having these strategies, right? How can they leverage the metrics and KPIs to secure those resources, those budgets, right? And approval for the budgets for the security initiatives that they're bringing up to the board.
See, this has been a long-standing question for CISOs, right? Because cybersecurity is a cost center. Most of the time, it's supporting the existing business, supporting from revenue loss, supporting from reputation loss. It's very hard to show return on investment in terms of, hey, I stopped 200 breaches, right? How, how can you measure it saying, yeah, you stopped 200 attacks, saying breaches, it's attacks, 200 attacks, you stopped in a quarter, right? But I didn't get breached, but you're asking for millions, right? So that is where an approach has evolved within cybersecurity, right? By showing reduction in risk, right? For example, last year, your risk exposure was 100 applications. Let's consider 100 applications were facing internet with vulnerable patches. You didn't add WAF, you didn't add, IPS. You can throw in any number of technologies, but that's where it comes in. Hey, implementing WAF can bring your exposure to, 80. Implementing IPS probably another 20, right? It might bring down to 60. If you have an EDR, it might bring down to 40. Right. If you convey in a way that business understand enterprise risk management, right? If you look at most of the organization are doing risk mitigation. For example, what is the risk of my competitor overtaking me? I have to innovate, right? Without innovation, my competitor will overtake me, right? That's a risk mitigation. They are investing on developing new feature, researching feature, implementing feature. The same is applicable in cybersecurity, right? If you look at it, you know, if I don't do this, what is my risk of getting, impacted from a incident? And if I get impacted by cyber incident, how much am I going to lose, right? For example, if my business is down for 4 hours because of a cyber incident, what is the revenue loss, right? And that's where return on investment in terms of risk reduction is the most value that you can present to your executives and board members, because that's what they understand: risk aversion, risk diversion, risk mitigation, right? Those are the strategies you have to speak to executives to understand how their investment, let's say 100K, 200K, or even millions, has mitigated the risk or reduced their exposure in terms of breach. For example, if you look at it, right, if my operation goes down because of ransomware and my loss is hypothetically 100K, and I'm bringing a solution of 200K to protect it, it's not a good mitigation strategy. You're overprotecting it, basically. 100K value, you are investing 200K to protect it. It's not right in terms of business or in terms of cybersecurity, right? You cannot have a fence which is expensive than your house, basically, right? Your house is what you have to protect. You can't have a fence which is expensive than your house, right? That's the ideology in terms of business. So you have to, as CISO, you have to be mindful what is the value of assets that you are protecting, what is the probability of those loss, how you can have those costs in check, making sure you're not overprotecting or overspending on, let's say, for protecting a $10 value of asset, you don't, take out your sword of $100 to protect, right? So that's the idea behind it. And that's the approach a CISO should consider, in my opinion, right? Looking at, what are the investment are you making? What is the value of assets you are protecting? If an organization is making 1 million, you don't spend 10 million on cybersecurity, right? Unless you are doing some classified CIA kind of stuff where security becomes the main focus of your entire organization, right? Because that's where CISOs has to be mindful, focus on the real risk that the company is going across, what's the value associated with it. It's difficult to put a value, go with probabilistic number and see your cost looks at those numbers. One of the advice I've learned in my past is look at your IT budget, spend a portion on it on your cybersecurity. If you don't have a cybersecurity budget to start with in your organization, if not, if you already have a cybersecurity budget, make sure whatever in terms of business criticality and the value of the assets that you are protecting doesn't exceed those costs. The budget shouldn't exceed the value of the asset being protected. So keep those in mind. And that's how, you can leverage those numbers when you're asking for a budget. If you say, hey, I have 100K assets to protect, I need 100K, which costs around $1 per asset, it will easily get approved. If you say I have 100K budget, but I need 1 million, they will never approve. Right? You have to scale it up. You have to show them the reduction in risk. Let's say if I'm buying an EDR for 100K or MDR for 200K, right? What is that I'm reducing, right? Am I reducing a $2 million cost of breach? If yes, they will sign it off. If I'm protecting a $20 worth of breach, definitely it's not going to work out, right? You have to be mindful about the budget you are asking for and what you are protecting and what is that company is going to save by investing in you as cybersecurity executives, right? That is what you have to make it clear. And some of the areas are, reduction of risk or quantifying how is it going to save, how much is going to save, right? Go on quarter, year on year, saying this is the exposure it reduced. This brings the probability of $4 million of breach, right? I bring that $4 million because if you look at IBM's data breach report, right? An average US company to recover from a cybersecurity incident suffers $4.4 million, right? If you look at that number, it's mind-boggling. CISOs are fighting for 40K for a service or 40K for a product. If you trade off, if you present it in a right way for your organization, consider it as a bridge. Hey, you invest 40,000 now, or you lose $4.4 million later. This $4.4 million includes business disruption, brand reputation, recovering from an incident. For example, ransomware happens only once. To recover, it takes 15 days in some of the organizations, right? Because some of the time backups are not ready. They have never restored it. They have never tested backups. Backups are corrupted, right? So it's never a straight path to recovery if they don't have a mature process. Most of the time, recovery takes time and companies bleeding money, right? It's not just ransomware. It's companies bleeding money. And some of the times there are ransom threats, like if you don't pay us, we are going to, leak the data, which results in brand reputation. Don't even forget the legal complications, right? HIPAA, it invites legal, right? Financial data, PII data, it involves legal scrutiny, right? As CISOs, you have to be mindful and you have to convey these things in your budget meeting, right? You either lose $4.4 million when you happen to be or invest in this 40K to reduce it by 90%, right? So that's the level of discussion you have to take it to executives and say, this is why I need 40K to save you 4.4 million, right? And it's a no-brainer. If executive sees what you are presenting and if he's on the same page, they will sign it off immediately. And that's the level of discussion you have to present with your executives, because just going with them and saying, I need a EDR, I need 40K, they will, first question they ask is, why? Right? You have to be prepared for those. Why? How is it going to help? Why not? Right? What if I don't do it now? Right? You have to create and answer those questions. Once you have answers to those questions and executives see the impact of it, and in my experience, they have never said a no for cybersecurity, because most of the executives nowadays are getting educated in cybersecurity. They see it as a real threat. It's more about how you convey the urgency and quantify those risks to your executives. You get those budgets.
No, that's great. And again, right, having these resources in place, right? But when you lay it out, you're going to lose 4 million and you're going to invest 40,000, right?
Yeah.
Really, levels out the playing field for the CISOs, right? So having these metrics truly helps CISOs have a better understanding of their own environment, but also able to communicate more effectively to leadership. And that's great, right? Adaptation to understanding the cybersecurity metrics and KPIs is important, right? I like your analogy too around the fence and the house, right? Where are you spending the most money, and how do you justify what comes first? But when they're talking about adaptation, right, especially in today's, again, right, evolving threats, how can cybersecurity metrics and KPIs help account, right? How do these CISOs adapt these metrics to account for the evolving threats and for attack methodologies, right? Kind of tying that whole discussion in.
See, one of the things in my experience, what helped me is, right, threat modeling is usually done once a year or multiple yearly ones, right? And that's actually bad because your business is not the same as a year ago, right? It keeps evolving. So that's the trend. So both sides are evolving. Your business is evolving, threats are evolving, but your threat model remains static, right? And that's where nowadays the threat modeling is more frequent. right? With respect to business, with respect to infrastructure, or with respect to organization. So it becomes a quarterly exercise, or some of the tools do it automated way, which is fantastic, right? So that the CISO or CEO will be able to see the active threats or their attack surface, they call it, right, in real time. And that's where I have seen in real time, in my experience, because we did a threat modeling for one of the application a year ago. That application completely revamped within 6 months. So our threat modeling went out of the window, right? Whatever we did doesn't even apply because those threats never exist now. It's all new, latest packages or latest business logic, latest features that have been implemented, which can be misused in any way that we are not even aware, right? So having that continuous threat modeling for your business as a whole keeps you ahead of the time, and have proactive approach in dealing with those evolving threats. And the other things that I've seen irreplaceable is continuous learning, especially in cybersecurity. Whether you be a CISO, SOC analyst, or an entry level security engineer, right? If you don't learn, you get left behind by the industry, right? If you look at the way industry has evolved, back in 2015, 2016, it was SIM solution ruling the day. Then then threat intelligence came, then EDR, XDRs. I can't even keep up with it, right? It keeps evolving. There is always a new solution, new product that is evolving, which is trying to make cybersecurity professional life simpler, in a way more complicated also, because most of the products are difficult to replace. The vendors are, multi-year contracts, and that makes it challenging and also exciting, right? There is always new things to learn. If you don't learn, you cannot be proactive in protecting your organization. As executives, right, CISOs has to be well informed in their decision making. What I've seen, one of the ill practices in the industries are, some of the CISOs are taken to ride in terms of overselling solutions, right? You sell 5 year. I've even seen a customer who was committed for 25 years of McAfee, right? McAfee changed hands in three vendors. Like McAfee got sold to Intel, Intel to somebody else. I don't even remember now, right? But the customer is locked in for 25 years. I don't know what was going through their mind, but it's an impressive sell, but bad for customer, right? So those kind of scenarios do exist within the industry. I have seen multiple customers that procure the product and never even touch, right? Because customer didn't see the value because the salesman just sold it, and those kind of things really make it challenging in terms of CISO's justification for getting budgets or developing metrics. Because when you go with a specific set of metrics, definitely they are looking for their investment returns. Hey, last year we purchased this one, right? What happened to those, right? If you don't have an actionable metric, your budget will be cut, because that's a clear indication of you're not utilizing your budgets well, right? Or you're overspending, or the decisions in order to procure those products didn't yield the relevant results, right? So those are the metrics that needs to come out of, in terms of, when you're looking for uh, constant learning, make sure what is working in the industry, right? There are numerous research done by SANS, ISC2, lot of vendors in the space, right? Service providers. We do provide metrics. And if you look at one of the key metrics, many of the industry players not even fully utilizing the value of SOAR, which came up in 2018, 2019 as emerging technology. Everybody had a lot of promise, but most of the customers are yet to see the full potential of it, right? Many vendors made investments, many customers procured the product, but the value out of those products in terms of automation, reducing the burden of L1, which AI is presently solving, right? Those problems were never actually solved, right? So that's where, keeping up with what's working, what's not working within the industry will give you informed decision-making capabilities on which direction you should take your organization, especially your team, in terms of their own development, and organization keeping up with latest technology stack in order to simplify, risk reduction, I would call it, right? And make sure the compliance criteria are met.
No, and I think you bring up some excellent points when it comes to continuous learning, right? Or the industry will leave you behind. And you bring up some great points around SOAR as well, right? How today, AI is now addressing some of that automation that truly does a lot of the heavy lifting. Thank you for sharing such insight. Given for our audience today, what advice would you give to some of the CISOs, right, who are just starting to develop a cybersecurity metrics and KPI programs? What are like the top 3 or 5 things that you think they should focus on? Covering kind of the things that we discussed today as well.
Yeah, one of the basic or the number one advice I would say is probably many of the industry people would agree, starting from SOC analyst or junior security engineers to until the CISOs, keep your asset inventories up to date, right? One of the biggest challenge not many people speak about in the cybersecurity industry is asset inventories are never up to date. Thanks for the clouds, right? Most of them are auto updated nowadays, but they're still missing a crucial piece. Who is the owner of this asset? Which business service does it relate to? Who is the focal point of this? And what is the risk associated with this asset, right? Some of the basic information are left hanging for multi-decades. There is a reason for it. It's not like cybersecurity failed it, but overall IT has emerged or had a trajectory of exponential growth for 30, 40 years. And if you look at cybersecurity, it started emerging late in 2000 or in the past decade, right? That's where companies started picking up. And if you look at cybersecurity as a long gap to catch up with IT, right? Because IT had a head start of 30 or 40 years, whereas cybersecurity 2008, 2010, or in the last decade is when cybersecurity started hitting pace in terms of catching up. That shows in asset inventory. If you look at most of the organizations, right, ADR has number of assets, SIM has number of assets, vulnerability management has its own number of assets. The CMDB, configuration management databases, right, they have their own assets. None of them match. That's the biggest problem. And in rare cases, if any two of it match, there is no owner information or department information. There is no criticality assigned to it, business unit assigned to it, right? It becomes very challenging for cybersecurity professionals, especially, not only for CISOs, right? And that's where it becomes, as a CISO, you cannot protect everyone. You have to live with that. There will be breaches, there will be incident. The only way to deal with this, you be prepared for it, right? That is one advice. You will never stop 100% of the breaches, right? None of the product, none of the vendors, not even any of the CISOs claim they can stop 100% of the breaches. That's the nature of the industry. Threats are evolving, business is evolving, cybersecurity is catching up, right? It's always been a catch-up game for cybersecurity, right? And that's where proactive monitoring, focus on proactive monitoring, focus on anomalies, keep your asset inventories up to date, and be prepared to handle breaches. Have a crisis management, have a communication plan drafted, be thorough in your incident response plans, have every participant in your incident response plan, have your processes memorized by those participants. Everybody should know with a switch of a button that they are in crisis, they know what to do. Because most of the time when incident happens, everybody are in panic. 20 people on call screaming at each other, what's happening, this is happening, that is not happening, right? It creates chaos. Being a CISO, right, it's more about managing people, guiding the organization, and protecting that organization in terms of breaches or brand. And one of the key component is making that organization resilient to cybersecurity breaches, right? You'll not protect it, but you'll prepare them to handle it. And that's the responsibility of CISO. Start with that. And one of the advice I would like to give is the prime most, identify your critical assets, critical risk for the business, start working around there and then expand out. If you start first from outside in, it's going to be a disaster, right? Because you are starting to protect the perimeter, the core is getting breached, then whatever you did on the perimeter doesn't even matter much, right? So focus on your core critical asset. What are the risk it possesses to company? In cybersecurity, we call it as crown jewel. Identify those crown jewels. Start building controls around it. Start focusing, gaining visibility, because having data in your board discussion and executive decisions speaks mountains. Because unless that, It's always a thing on your mind or on a piece of paper. When you put a number to it, there is a context which people can listen and compare against, right? If you say we had 10 breaches, 3 months in three different departments, right? Definitely some controls are not working, right? So those things can be evaluated. So those numbers leads to actionable decisions. Have numbers actionable, identify your crown jewels, start working around that, protect that. Once you're comfortable there, expand yourself out. That's an approach I would like to.
No, thank you for that advice. I mean, I think that's solid information, right? And a solid strategy too to helping CISOs who are just starting to develop these cybersecurity metrics and KPI programs. Thank you for that wonderful insight. And one last question, right? As a leader, right? In order to know where you're going and moving forward, you have to know where you've been and understand the impact of the business and cybersecurity as well. So, a question that I would have for you, maybe you can share your thoughts on this. What is the future, right, of cybersecurity metrics and KPI, the impact of emerging trends and technologies that can ultimately, change the measurement of security posture in relation to cybersecurity metrics and KPIs?
As I said, if we talk about anything future from 2021 or 22 onwards, it's AI, right? Because there it holds a lot of promise. It's about waiting and watching how it spans out. If you look at Microsoft's investment into cybersecurity, releasing a security co-pilot, right? It holds a lot of promise, especially one of the things that from my past experience I've learned is if you want to grow as an industry, as a person or people, you have to delegate your tasks, right? When you delegate, because if you are fully occupied, you are never learning and you are never growing, right? You are occupied 100% of the time in the present, doing the same things. And that's an experience that I had, and that's a principle that I follow. If I want to grow, you have to delegate. And that's the promise I see in AI, right? Because a lot of SOC analysts are every day fighting 100% of the time without learning, without having an opportunity to learn, because they're always firefighting incident. With AI into picture, right? It can take over in terms of delegation, not the jobs, delegation, right? Those routine, mundane tasks of correlating, finding true positive, taking certain actions, which SOAR was promising to do, right? But unfortunately, it's still not adopted in masses, right? A lot of analysts still struggle with manual incidents. I've seen this, right, in my past experiences, where analysts are combing through 200, 2000 alerts to identify one or two incidents, right? It's very taxing. Sometimes they get fatigued, they miss one or two, right? And this is what AI holds promising. It can comb through data like needle in a haystack and identify the needles within minutes, right? Rather than analysts spending 8 hours of time. Now they have 7 hours or almost 8 hours, which they can focus on elevating their skills, elevating their roles within the organization. Probably they can do some reverse engineering, incident response, right? This is where I see, in terms of future of cybersecurity evolving with the help of AI. And focusing on machine learning, definitely there is areas of predictive analytics. Anomaly detection needs an improvement, although many vendors claim there are anomaly detection. There's still room for improvements because still UPA plays a crucial role, but nothing conclusive yet. Because as humans, we are random by nature, right? Sometimes I log in 2 p.m., sometimes I log in 4 p.m. If you look at a machine, that's an anomaly, but again, unless will become a false, unless will get a false positive, because when they check back, we usually say it's us, right? Sometimes I type in 2 times password, sometimes I type in 4 times. It's an anomaly, but it's actually not. This is what AI and machine learning I see getting better at anomaly detection, looking at more parameters rather than failed scenarios, right? So that's where it holds. And definitely quantum computing is a space that I look forward, right? And looking at quantum computing, it might shift the dynamics of cybersecurity because a lot of encryptions will go out of the window if quantum computing, comes to the masses, the same speed the AIs reach the masses, right? So a lot of work has been ongoing with cybersecurity, building quantum proof encryptions. I think it's only a matter of time whether quantum takes the leap, or quantum proof cybersecurity solutions take the leap. I think that's some of the metrics that, as an organization, if you want to look, what is your quantum proof, right? Is your organization quantum proof? That's something to evaluate if you're especially dealing with high value businesses, right? um, that's becomes crucial. And some of the areas, what I also see in terms of future of cyber security is, if you look at patterns, right? I have focused this in the last decades. Electric vehicles, Tesla, when it was at the peak, I would say in the peak of marketing, I would still say it's still in the peak. But when EVs became the cycle, EVs became the focus of cybersecurity, lapses in cybersecurity. Crypto became the focus in 2017, 2018, or 2019, 20, then followed with a cybersecurity incident on crypto industry. The same I am foreseeing that it might happen on AI. We might see a series of breaches because AI is still emerging. Everybody is understanding how to utilize it best, how it is working. One more area not many people are talking about is space. There are a lot of technology components, especially outdated ones, are on space. It's a matter of time when cyber attacks hit space, right? Because imagine if you compromise a if you compromise a satellite, you you don't do anything. You just break it into pieces. You will destroy 10 to 100 other satellites because they're all orbiting in a close orbit, right? The damage could be significant. And with internet going to space, countries might lose internet, countries might lose GPS, countries might lose communication. Right? There's a lot of at stake here, and it's a matter of time when, right? I've seen some of the space organizations started thinking, but they are at very early stages because some of the spacecrafts have been in the orbit for ages, right? Probably they're running Windows 7 or XP, right? And their communication, not sure. Even that's my area of research that I'm reading through and trying to catch up, because AI and space, I think they have to watch out for cybersecurity because that's going to be the hot field in next 3 to 5 years.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Arun. Oh, thank you for the insight, and thank you for sharing such in-depth details right around your experience and your thoughts around, again, right, cybersecurity metrics and KPIs that CISOs should definitely be focusing on. So I want to thank you for your time, and thank you again for joining us for our first episode ever here with our CISO Roundtable here at Sennovate. And I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. And thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Tony. Glad to be here.
Thank you.